I'm bringing you must start and sit running backs for week 14 of the fantasy football season. For most of you, this is the last week of your regular season. You are pushing for the playoffs. Let me know what your record is and if you've secured the playoffs yet in the comments below. We're going to go through all 30 teams, all 15 matchups. At the end of this video, we will have talked about more than 50 running backs in total. So consider this your complete guide for the running back position here in week 14. Keep in mind, we still have two teams on a bye, the Commanders and the Cardinals, meaning you will have no James Conner, Brian Robinson, or Antonio Gibson. If you want to take a quick second and pause to look at the terminology I'm going to be using, go ahead and do so. But let's go ahead and get to the first matchup. Shout out to Amazon Prime, just pulling out all the stops to get us this absolutely fantastic matchup on Thursday night. That's right. We've got Bailey Zappi and the Patriots at Mitchell Trubisky and the Steelers. It's a 30.5 point over under, which means that Vegas is expecting less than 16 points from each team in this matchup. That's a extremely low over under. It's actually the lowest over under of the week. And for fantasy purposes, when we look at the running back position, I think there's a couple names that could help you in a tough spot, but I don't personally see any clear start that I'm very excited to, go ahead and put straight into my lineups. I don't think Ramondre Stevenson is going to play in this game, which means that Ezekiel Elliott is now a spot start. If you're in a tough position, you can put him into your lineup. Last week when Ramondre Stevenson went down versus the Chargers, Zeke ended up with 23 total touches, including 5 targets, so he should step straight into that RB1 role for that offense. Now, how valuable will that be? I'm not exactly sure. It's a decent matchup, and it looks like their offense is going to revolve around Zeke this week, so I'm fine to start him. Expect about 10 to 15 PPR points. Now, as for the Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, man, it really looked like we were about to get Jaylen Warren completely unlocked in this offense after they fired Matt Canada. But since they fired Matt Canada, not a lot has changed. You could actually make the argument that Najee Harris has become more of a focal point for this offense with no Matt Canada. Both of these guys are fine spot starts. I cannot imagine a scenario in which the Patriots are just up big time on this team, forcing the Steelers to not run the ball. I think both of these guys are fine options, but I personally don't believe that there's a running back in this matchup that's going to win you your week. Okay, let's get that boring matchup out of the way. Let's start with the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate games here. That is the Bucks at the Falcons for the first one, 39.5 point over under. For the Bucks, it's quite simple. Very few running backs, if any, are getting the market share that Rachaad White is getting this year. He is absolutely dominating touches, dominating snap share. He is the RB5 on the year at the time of recording this, coming off a game versus Carolina where he touched the ball 25 times and found the end zone. Yes, it's not a good matchup. In fact, this is the second worst matchup for your running back. But with how Rachaad is involved in the air and purely the amount of volume he sees, I'm going to label him a must start personally. Now, on the Falcons side of the ball, they are also facing a very difficult rush defense. The Bucks, who give up the 11th fewest points to the position. You can run on them, but it's very difficult. As we know with Atlanta, though, their entire identity is built around running the ball and establishing the run. Now, with Bijan Robinson, RB12 on the year, coming off a game where he didn't necessarily perform the way we wanted him to, but the volume was still there. 23 touches in week 13. The week before that, 22 in a 27 PPR point game versus the New Orleans Saints. We have seen him in bad matchups perform well. With how talented he is, I cannot think of a scenario where Bijan is not starting in your lineup. As for Tyler Algier, I would label him a risky start, meaning 90% of people have a better option out there. But if you're in a deep format, you play in a 16, 18, 20-man league, I would understand why, hey, maybe he gets into the end zone, he'll get some goal line work, you could put him in there. But again, 90% of people, I think, have a much better option. Okay, the third matchup we're going to look at today is the Rams at the Ravens. This game is super crucial for the Rams as they are trying to get into the postseason, and they've kind of turned it around a little bit with people getting more and more healthy. Speaking of, Kyren Williams has been an absolute superstar since coming back from that high ankle sprain. In week 12, the 38-point game versus the Cardinals. Last week versus a tough run defense, he gets 20 PPR points, including averaging over 4 yards per carry. Averaging 4 yards per carry against the Cleveland Browns, that is extremely impressive. He's averaging 5.5 targets per game since coming back. I mean, even in bad matchups, Kyren Williams remains a must-start in my mind. I know this is a bad matchup versus the Ravens. They're technically the 6th worst matchup, but again, we just saw Kyren succeed versus a tough defense versus the Cleveland Browns. So I'm putting him back in there, especially with PPR upside. As for the Ravens, this is one of those backfields. There's a couple where it's just incredibly difficult to gauge on a weekly basis. For a while there, we thought Gus Edwards was completely taking over this backfield. If you look from week 7 to week 11, there was very few running backs that were better than Gus Edwards. I mean, he was a top 5 running back in that stretch. The issue is in the last 2 weeks, we have seen Gus's snap percentage and total touches go down in both weeks from 38% of the snaps to 27% of the snaps. Last time out versus the Chargers, he only had 9 total opportunities, and this team is publicly saying that they want Keaton Mitchell more and more involved, and that's exactly what they're doing. Since week 9, 4 weeks in a row, Keaton Mitchell has had a higher snap percentage, 18 to 24 to 36 to 46% last time out, where he touched the ball 11 total times. So I don't see a clear start personally. The matchup isn't that great. I think you can kind of make a case for both of these guys. With Gus Edwards, hey, if they get into the, inside the 10-yard line in the red zone, Gus could definitely get a rushing touchdown. With Keaton, you can make the case that he's just super efficient. It takes one play for him to return value. So I can see value or reasons to start one of these guys in a desperate situation. But overall, I would say 70% of people have a better option than one of these two names, just given the unknowns at this very moment. All right, moving on to the 4th matchup. That is the Lions at the Bears. We've got an interdivisional game. This game was really close the last time these two guys played. 42.5 point over under. The Detroit Lions are favored even though it's in Chicago. I've been saying this all year, and I'm going to continue to say it. I view the Detroit Lions backfield, both of these names, as absolute must starts. David Montgomery is getting you that volume. He's getting you the goal line touches, the touchdowns. In fact, Montgomery has scored a touchdown in each of his last 4 games since coming back from that injury. There's really only one game he hasn't scored a touchdown this entire year, and he's currently averaging more than a touchdown per game for this team. It's just the perfect system for Montgomery. And as for Gibbs, it was a disappointing game last week out, but we're still looking at a guy who's getting 5 to 7 targets a game, super involved, super efficient, can score on any touch. I think he's got to be in your lineup. And what is a good matchup versus the Bears? They are 13th in points allowed to the running back spot. Now, as far as the Bears themselves, I think there's going to be a lot of people out there asking about Rashawn Johnson. If I had to start a name in this backfield, I believe that name would be Rashawn Johnson. Before the bye week, Rashawn played 74% of the snaps, and he had 15 total touches to Khalil Herbert's 8. Now, the kicker there is that Deonta Foreman was not playing, and we don't know if Deonta Foreman's going to play at this point while I'm recording this video. If Deonta Foreman plays, I don't see anyone in this matchup that you would want to start. It becomes too messy, too confusing. Now, if Deonta Foreman misses time, he doesn't play in this game, I think you can, in a desperation scenario, put Rashawn Johnson into your lineup, but I would say 80% of people have a better option, especially considering that the Lions' rushing defense is not one that you want to mess with. So just keep that in mind as you are looking at your lineups. All right, the 5th matchup we're going to look at is the Colts at the Bengals. How about them Bengals getting the win on Monday Night Football? Prayers up to Trevor Lawrence. Let's hope that he's all right. But there's a 40.5 point over under here, and the Colts were favored at the time of recording that. I'm not so sure they're going to be favored anymore after Jake Browning's performance on Monday Night Football. But let's look at the Bengals side of the ball here. This is absolutely a must-start situation for Joe Moneybags Mixon. He gets the Colts, who give up the fourth most points to fantasy running backs. He's coming off a game where he touched the ball 18 times and scored 2 rushing touchdowns. So Joe Mixon, for any 12-man league, I really struggle to think of a scenario in which you can sit that player. And as for Zach Moss, I would also label him a must-start. And that is purely based on the volume that he is seeing in this offense. He played 94% of the snaps last week, and he had 22 total touches. Zach Moss might not have found the end zone this week, but it's a fine matchup. Bengals are middle of the pack. I'm going to go ahead and say you put him into your lineups. Now, in your smaller 8 or 10-man leagues, you might have a better option, but I'm saying he's a must-start from the 12-man perspective. All right, moving on to the 6th matchup. We got the Jags at the Browns. Again, let's hope that Trevor Lawrence, is going to be okay. I don't think he's going to play in this game, though. We'll probably see C.J. Beathard, but that doesn't matter for Travis Etienne's sake. If anything, you could see more dump-offs for Travis Etienne in an offense that is going to be probably more reliant on the run game without Trevor. So I'm definitely still going to say Travis Etienne is a must-start, RB3 on the year. We know how special he is. And the Browns, while it sounds like a really, really bad matchup, they're currently about middle of the pack to running back. So beginning of the year, they were a terrible matchup, but something's kind of clicked for offenses that are facing them, and they have figured out how to attack this defense on the ground. And as for the Cleveland Browns, it's getting a little confusing. It really is. Jerome Ford, it looked like he was completely taking over this backfield. And then last week, Kareem Hunt actually ends up with more total touches. It's just a very confusing backfield right now. But the good news is, at minimum, that Joe Flacco is at least making this offense competent. So I think you can start Jerome Ford. Between those two names, I'd rather start Ford. I think I have more confidence in him. He's more involved in the passing game. But just keep in mind that this is getting a little confusing in Cleveland. All right, the 7th matchup we're going to look at here is the Panthers at the Saints. 38-point over-under, and the Saints are favored at home. Of course they are. It's the Carolina Panthers. Of course they are favored against the Panthers. But speaking of the Panthers, how about Chuba Hubbard? In the last 2 weeks, Chuba Hubbard is averaging over 21 PPR points per game, 3 touchdowns in the span of 2 weeks. And this coaching staff is clearly committed to running the ball. Last week, Chuba, 25 rushing attempts to Miles's 8. So clearly Chuba is their guy. If you're going to start someone here, Chuba is a fine play. But keep in mind, this offense is not that good, and it's not a very good matchup against the Saints either. So I would limit expectations. I would personally say I'm not expecting a 20-point game again this week. I think you're probably going to get somewhere about 10 to 12 points instead. But that's a fine option depending on injuries in your league. And as for the Saints, we really don't need to make this complicated. You guys know that you start Alvin Kamara coming off a game where he was targeted 8 times, 28 PPR points. He's the RB4 on the year. Of course, you guys know we're starting that superstar into our lineups. All right, the 8th matchup we're going to look at here is the Texans at the Jets. So Texans really need this win to keep, trying to get into the playoffs. The good news for them is technically as a team, it's better for them that Dameon Pierce is healthy. The bad news for us as fantasy enthusiasts, if you will, is that it makes everything super confusing. You remember earlier how we were talking about the Baltimore Ravens backfield? There's a couple of those backfields where it's just super confusing on how to navigate it. The first week Dameon Pierce was back, he only saw 18% of the snaps, and Devin Singletary was dominating opportunities. Now, the second week back, Dameon Pierce actually touched the ball more than Devin Singletary, and neither of these players were all that good for fantasy football. Now, Dameon fell into the end zone, but he averaged under 2.7 yards per carry, and he had 10 points and scored a touchdown. Do you know how hard it is to have just 10 points and score a touchdown? That's impressive, impressively bad. So I don't think that for me personally, there's not really a running back I would like to start. I know the matchup is technically good. The Jets give up the 6th most points to fantasy running backs. If I had to choose a name, for me, it's still Devin Singletary because of what he gives you through the air, but I don't personally feel very good about this matchup. And as for the Jets, Breece Hall, man, it's really tough, and I don't think it's really his fault personally. You can let me know if you disagree. But when you are scouting this team and when you're trying to figure out how to stop them offensively, all you really need to do is shut down Breece Hall, and you're going to win the game. And we have seen that teams are consistently just, let's stop Breece, let's stop Breece. The good news for fantasy is that he is getting so many targets. I mean, he's averaging about 8 targets per game in the last 3 weeks. So any PPR format, I would say he's absolutely still a must start. We know it only takes 1 touch for Breece to break it off for a touchdown. All right, the 9th matchup we're going to look at here is the Vikings at the Raiders. This is the start of the afternoon slate of games. 40.5 point over under in Las Vegas, and the Vikings are favored away from home. How about that? I don't think I personally expected that. I thought the Raiders would be favored at home. We don't know who's starting at quarterback yet. I would expect Josh Dobbs. I know he had a 4 interception game last time out, but I still think he gives them their best chance to win. And similar to the Texans, similar to the Ravens, this backfield, it's really murky. It's not an exciting backfield. Alexander Mattison gets the touches, but Ty Chandler is the more explosive back, but there's no touches to rely on. I don't personally see a clear start in this game, even though the Raiders are a very, very good matchup. I would have very little confidence starting Madison or Ty Chandler. I would say 80% of people have a better option out there. As far as Josh Jacobs, you guys know this, but he is a must start. Keep it simple, stupid, KISS, a saying that we have. Start your stars, and Josh Jacobs is a superstar. Last time out, averaging 5.5 per clip and a touchdown versus the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a tough defense. He can get it done versus the Minnesota Vikings. We just know how talented he is. All right, the 10th matchup we're going to look at is the Seahawks at the 49ers. 46.5 point over under. The 49ers are favored, and this is the 2nd largest spread of the week, meaning that Vegas is expecting the Niners to win this game comfortably. They expect them to win it comfortably. As far as CMC, I'm not going to waste your time. You start him. You guys know that. The running backs for Seattle, this is a messy situation right now. There's a chance that Ken Walker could play. Pete Carroll was quoted to have said he might be able to play. That's not very helpful, is it, Pete? But he might be able to play. If Ken Walker is out there, even though it's a bad matchup, I'm probably putting Ken Walker into my lineup. I assume he comes back and he takes over the role where he sees 15 to 17 touches. He's their goal line guy. That's what I would expect from Ken Walker. Now, Zach Charbonnet is actually dealing with his own injury himself. He bruised his knee versus the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. He looked great in that game, but I think he's probably not going to play. I don't imagine him playing. And if he's playing and Ken is playing, there's just no way you should start a guy like Zach Charbonnet. Now, in the unlikely or potential event where Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are both not playing, the question will become, do I start DJ Dallas? And my answer is no, I would not start DJ Dallas. 49ers give up the 5th fewest points to the position. DJ Dallas isn't a very talented player, and I don't think he'll get the lion's share like Zach Charbonnet. I think there'll be more running backs involved if he is the starter. All right, the 11th game we're going to look at here. This is a good one. These teams have faced off a lot in the playoffs. We've got the Bills at the Chiefs in Kansas City in Arrowhead. Let's see if the Chiefs can get back on track. 47.5 point over under, the 2nd highest over under of the week. And Vegas is currently favoring the home team in Kansas City. Speaking of those Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco is absolutely a must start in my eyes. The Bills are a middle of the pack matchup, but Isaiah Pacheco, can we be honest at this point? As crazy as it sounds, he is the heart and soul of this offense. That sounds so weird to say, but you've got Pat Mahomes on the team, you've got Kelsey, but the heart and soul of this offense has been Isaiah Pacheco. 2 weeks ago, he touched the ball 20 times. Last week, he touched the ball 22 times. I mean, he is getting so much volume. Since their bye week, he has not failed to touch the ball at least 20 times in any game. The RB9 on the year, and we know that the Bills are a team that you can run on this year. So we're going to go ahead and say he's a must start. Same for James Cook. With this coaching change that we saw, it seems like they want to utilize James Cook a little bit more in Buffalo. Last time out, before the bye week, James Cook, 23 touches. 23 touches for James Cook, 7 of them being targets. That is the recipe for him being a league winner. Now, you can't run very well against the Chiefs, but with how involved he is through the air, I struggle to see a scenario in which you sit a guy like James Cook this week. All right, the 12th matchup we're going to look at here is the Broncos at the Chargers. Another interdivisional game, 43.5 point over under. Get this, at the time of recording, the Chargers are favored. The Chargers are favored over the Broncos. I found that to be interesting. But this is a good matchup for both of these running backs. Javonte Williams gets to face the Chargers. They give up the 10th most points to fantasy running backs. And Austin Eckler, who has been very, very bad. Like, truly, he's been awful. But he has an opportunity to bounce back in what is the best matchup for your running back in fantasy this year. No one gives up more points to the running back than the Broncos. Now, the Broncos as a defense have gotten much better, but that's been mostly through the air. They've still been quite vulnerable on the ground. I'm going to label Eckler a must start. In bad matchups, we will have to start sitting Austin Eckler. In truly bad matchups, like if you told me that this team is facing the Eagles, yeah, we're probably not starting Austin Eckler. That's a tough matchup. But this is the best matchup. We know what Eckler can do. We know how involved he is in the red zone. So we're going to go ahead and label Eckler a must start. I would be genuinely shocked if you don't have at least 12 PPR points from Austin Eckler this week. And as for Javonte Williams, I really wish they would completely unleash him. It seems like they're hesitant to do so. They keep getting Samaje and Jaleel involved. But it's a good matchup, and at least he's still getting reliable opportunities. In the last couple weeks, he's averaging at least 20 touches a game. So we're going to put him into our lineups for sure. All right, the 13th game, another one of those divisional matchups. This is probably game of the week. It's the Eagles at the Cowboys. Sunday night football, 52.5 point over under. The Cowboys are favored, and this is the highest over under of the week. So Vegas is telling us that matchup right there, yeah, expect a lot of fantasy points. Let's talk about the running backs here because technically it's not a good matchup for either side. The Cowboys are the, quick math, 7th worst matchup for your running back, and the Eagles are the worst matchup possible for your running back. Now, I don't know if DeAndre Swift is going to play or not in this game at the time of recording. If Swift is playing, I definitely believe that you can go ahead and put him in your lineup despite the bad matchup. He's just a player that is dynamic. He can score on any touch. If DeAndre Swift does not play, I do believe Kenneth Gainwell is a spot start option. We saw Kenneth Gainwell in week 1 handle 62% of the snaps. He had 18 total touches, and he had over 11 fantasy points. So, again, if DeAndre Swift is not playing, you can go ahead and spot start a guy like Kenneth Gainwell in what should be a high-scoring affair. As for Tony Pollard, how about the turnaround from Tony Pollard? In the last 3 weeks, there are few running backs you'd rather have on your roster. He's averaging over 18 PPR points per game in that time span, and he scored a touchdown in 3 weeks in a row. He is back on track. He's a crucial part of their offense, playing a high percentage of snaps. So while this is not a good matchup, he's on a very, very good offense, and I'm going to go ahead and put him into my lineups personally. All right, to end the stream, we have 2 Monday Night Football double headers. The first double header is the Titans at the Dolphins, 47 point over under, This is the largest spread of the week. So Vegas is telling us if there's going to be a blowout, it's probably Titans-Dolphins, and the Dolphins are going to put up a lot of points. Now, let's talk about that Miami backfield. I've been a big advocate of Devon Achane this year, and, he kind of got clowned on by some people because the game he came back, Recently, that was in week 11. He had 1 snap, or I think 2 snaps, and then he went down with an injury. But all of us who believed in Devon and kind of stayed true, we saw the true superstar status last week where he had 21 total touches. Now, keep in mind, Mostert played a lot when this game was in the balance. I think it will be a very even approach between these two names. It's a very good offense. They're expected to dominate this team. I'm playing both Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane with a lot of confidence this week. Now, as far as the Titans go, I am labeling Derrick Henry a must start, but I think there's a potential for this to be a trap game. Why do I say that? I say that because we are talking about the highest spread this week. If the Dolphins truly are going to dominate this team, it's probably not going to be a Derrick Henry game. We will probably see Tajay Spears out there if they need to throw the ball a lot late in the game, let's say third or fourth quarter. Regardless, we know how good Derrick Henry can be. I'm putting him into my lineups. If he doesn't play, which he's not in concussion protocol, so I don't see why he wouldn't. But if he doesn't play, I think Tajay is a fine spot start, similar to the likes of a Kenneth Gainwell if Swift doesn't play. And to end the video, the 15th matchup, Packers at Giants, 37.5 point over under. I don't think Aaron Jones plays. If he does, I don't feel comfortable playing him. And I would say 80% of people have a better option than A.J. Dillon as well. Even when Aaron Jones is out, A.J. Dillon is not winning you your week. Let's just be honest. And this team is throwing the ball a lot. They're trusting Jordan Love. Now, as far as Saquon Barkley goes, that's one of those guys who's just a superstar. It's not necessarily a bad matchup. The Packers give up the 8th most points to running backs. You can start Saquon. Let's hope that he is their offense. Let's hope that he is featured because we know how damn good he can be. I mean, we're literally just 2 games away from when he put up 31 points against the Washington Commanders. So that is it for today. Let me know what you guys think. If you have a tough situation, a tough start sit, words are hard, right? If you have a tough start sit, let us know in the comments below. We'll try to reply to as many as we can. But of course, if you're asking a question, maybe do the community a favor and scroll through the questions and reply to a couple yourself. But that's it. We appreciate you. Hit the like button to show some love, and we'll see you guys very, very soon. All up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.